A perfect brew of deceit. The morning light streamed through the windows of grounded truth, illuminating the rustic wooden tables and the chalkboard menu with its daily specials. Emma Harris wiped down the counter, inhaling the rich aroma of freshly ground coffee beans while watching her husband, Nate, charm the regulars with his easy smile and effortless banter. 10 years together, 5 of them married, 3 running this cafe in the heart of Austin. They were the perfect team. At least that's what everyone said. The couple that worked together stayed together. Emma had believed it too, until recently. "I'll be back late tonight," Nate said, kissing her cheek. His lips felt cold somehow. "Inventory stuff, don't wait up." Emma nodded, but something in his eyes didn't quite meet hers. For the third time that week, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at it, turned away slightly, and texted back with rapid fingers. That night, he packed a bag, movements methodical and practiced. Supplier meeting in Dallas. 2 days, maybe 3. "Again?" Emma asked, leaning against the doorframe. "That's the second time this month." Nate shrugged, not looking up from his packing. Growing business, growing problems. The coffee beans from Colombia aren't meeting our standards. Need to sort it out in person. After he left, Emma found a receipt in his jeans pocket while doing laundry. A dinner for 2 at Luciana's, an intimate restaurant they'd never visited together. $187 for a bottle of wine she'd never tasted. Her fingers trembled as she smoothed out the crumpled paper. The GPS tracker she'd slipped into Nate's laptop bag, a desperate measure she never thought she'd resort to, showed he wasn't in Dallas. The blinking dot on her phone screen had settled in Cedar Park, barely 20 miles away from their home. Emma called in sick to the cafe, leaving their assistant manager in charge, and drove there with her heart hammering against her ribs. She parked across from a modest bungalow with white shutters and a porch swing. Yellow roses bloomed in window boxes, just like the ones Emma had wanted for their own home. At 2:17 p.m., the front door opened. Nate stepped out, smiling that smile Emma thought belonged only to her. Behind him was a woman, tall, with chestnut hair cascading down her back. Nate took her hand, pulled her close, and kissed her deeply, passionately, right there in the open, without a care for who might see. Emma's world collapsed into a black hole of betrayal. Her fingers clutched the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. But something deeper than rage took hold, a cold, calculating curiosity, a need to understand the full extent of this deception before she tore it all down. Nate returned home at 11, smelling of unfamiliar perfume poorly masked by cologne. He moved through their home like a stranger, careful and distant. "How was Dallas?" Emma asked, her voice steady despite the tremor in her soul. "Productive," he said, not quite meeting her eyes. "But I'm tired. Going to shower." Emma sat in the darkness of their kitchen, listening to the water run. The man she loved was washing away the touch of another woman, preparing to lie beside her in their bed. The thought made her stomach turn. At 1:03 a.m., his phone illuminated the nightstand. Nate was still in the bathroom, the sound of the faucet running. Emma glanced at the screen. Dr. Harper. A doctor calling at this hour? Concern momentarily overrode her suspicion. She answered silently. "Hey, baby." A woman's voice purred through the speaker. "I thought you were still in bed with me. I miss your warmth already. My sheets still smell like you." Emma hung up without speaking, a single tear tracking down her cheek. It wasn't the betrayal that hurt most. It was the elaborate architecture of lies he'd constructed around their marriage. The foundation of her life was built on quicksand. "Who's Dr. Harper?" Emma asked over breakfast, watching Nate's face drain of color. She'd made his favorite, blueberry pancakes with real maple syrup, a last meal of sorts. "What are you talking about?" But his voice cracked, betraying him just as he had betrayed her. Cedar Park, the woman, the late-night calls. Emma's voice remained eerily calm as she cut her pancake into perfect triangles. "I want to meet her." "Emma, please, don't." She set down her fork with deliberate precision. "Don't insult me with more lies." After hours of denial, then anger, then pathetic pleas, Nate finally broke. "Her name is Sophie. We've been seeing each other for almost a year. Take me to her, now." The drive to Cedar Park passed in glacial silence. When Sophie opened the door, Emma staggered backward, her hand flying to her mouth. It was like looking into a distorted mirror. The same height, similar features, even the small beauty mark near her left eye. Their hair was different, their style of dress, but the resemblance was undeniable. "What the hell?" Sophie looked between them, confusion and anger battling on her face. "You brought your wife here? Are you insane?" "You knew I was married?" Emma asked, her voice hollow. The betrayal had just doubled, twisted into something even more grotesque. Sophie looked away, arms crossed defensively. "He said you were separating, that it was complicated, that you had an arrangement." Her eyes flashed to Nate. Clearly he lied to us both. Nate stood frozen between them, trapped in the crossfire of his own making. His face had gone from white to gray, hands trembling slightly at his sides. "I need a drink," Sophie muttered, disappearing into the house. The invitation to follow was implicit. When she returned, she carried not only a bottle of wine and glasses, but a framed photograph. "This is my father," she said, pouring the deep red liquid with a steady hand. "I never knew him. He abandoned us before I was born. My mother kept this picture, said I should at least know his face." Emma's hands trembled as she took the frame. The man in the photo had the same crooked smile she'd seen in her own childhood pictures. The same eyes that had watched her graduate, that had filled with tears when he walked her down the aisle. "Thomas Reeves?" Sophie's eyes widened, the wine glass freezing halfway to her lips. "How did you—" "He's my father too." Nate collapsed onto the sofa, his face ashen. "I had no idea, I swear to God. How could I possibly have known?" "Shut up," both women said in unison, their voices eerily similar in their contempt. "Did he know about us?" Sophie asked Emma, ignoring Nate completely. "Did he know he had another daughter?" "He died 5 years ago," Emma replied, still staring at the photograph. "Heart attack. I doubt he ever connected the dots. Or if he did, he never told me." The silence that followed was charged with a new energy, no longer just betrayal, but the strange kinship of shared blood and shared pain. Two strangers bound by the sins of their father and the betrayal of one man. "You know what this means?" Sophie finally said, a dangerous edge to her voice as she refilled their glasses. "He didn't just betray you with another woman. He betrayed you with your sister." Emma looked at Nate, seeing him truly for the first time. Not the charming cafe owner, not the loving husband, but a man who chased the same woman in different forms. A man who had, through some twisted Freudian nightmare, been drawn to the same genetic blueprint twice. "And now he'll pay for it," Emma said, clinking her glass against Sophie's. They moved quickly, efficiently, like sisters who'd known each other all their lives instead of mere hours. The shared blood of Thomas Reeves seemed to pulse between them, creating an instant bond forged in betrayal and revenge. Emma contacted their lawyer, removing Nate's name from the cafe's ownership documents, citing an infidelity clause they'd included on her father's advice years ago. "Always protect yourself in business," he'd told her, "even from those you love." He'd known something about betrayal, it seemed. Sophie, a financial advisor by profession, identified irregularities in Nate's personal accounting that she'd previously overlooked in the haze of their affair. Small discrepancies that, when compiled, painted a picture of systematic tax evasion. The IRS would be very interested in these, she said, showing Emma the evidence. Not enough for jail time, but enough to ruin him financially for years to come. When Nate's phone rang 3 days later, Emma watched his face crumple as the IRS investigator on the other end detailed the audit they were launching into his personal finances. "What have you done?" he whispered to Emma, covering the mouthpiece. "Nothing you didn't deserve," she replied, steel in her voice. "Nothing compared to what you did to us." Rain lashed against the windows of the cafe as Nate made his final plea. They sat at a corner table after closing time, the chairs upturned on all the other tables. The space that had once held their dreams now felt like a mausoleum. "I made a terrible mistake," he said, eyes red-rimmed from sleepless nights. "But we built this place together. We built our lives together. This can't be how it ends." Emma placed his wedding ring on the table between them. The small gold band made a hollow sound against the wood. "You never knew me at all, Nate. If you had, you'd have seen him in my face the moment you met Sophie. Give me another chance," he begged, reaching for her hand. "I'll do anything." She pulled away from his touch. "I already gave you everything I had," Emma said, "and you threw it away for a cheap thrill that turned out to be my own blood. There's a certain poetry to it, don't you think?" That night, Emma and Sophie built a bonfire in Sophie's backyard, feeding it with every remnant of Nate. Photographs, love letters, the tie Emma had given him on their first anniversary. They watched the flames consume the physical evidence of his betrayal, though the emotional scars would take longer to burn away. "To new beginnings," Sophie said, raising a glass as the fire crackled between them. "And to the sisters he never knew he created," Emma replied. A week later, Emma unlocked the cafe before sunrise, brewing the first batch of coffee alone. The space felt different now, wholly hers. She'd changed the name to Second Chances, painted the walls a warm terracotta, and redesigned the menu. No trace of Nate remained. The door chimed at exactly 7. Sophie stood there, hesitant. "Is this okay? Me being here?" Emma gestured to the empty chair across from her. "Family discount on the coffee." They talked for hours about their mothers, their childhoods in different states, the parallel lives they'd led without knowing, about the father who had abandoned one and partially raised the other, about the strange, twisted path that had brought them together. After Sophie left, Emma finally opened the envelope she'd found in her father's safe deposit box after his death. She'd been too afraid to look at its contents until now, sensing somehow that it would change everything again. Inside was a paternity test and a letter dated just weeks before his death. "My dearest Emma," it began, "by now you know about Sophie. What you don't know is that I am not your biological father either. Your mother and I adopted you when you were 3 days old. Your birth parents were Robert and Claire Daniels, who died in a car accident. I'm sorry I never told you. I always meant to, but the right time never came." Emma's hands shook as she read the final lines. "The most remarkable coincidence is that Sophie's mother, whom I loved briefly but deeply, adopted her child too. You and Sophie share no blood, but you are connected by the choices we made. Find her. Complete the circle I was too cowardly to close." Emma stared at the letter, then at her reflection in the window of the cafe. The betrayal that had shattered her world had actually set her free. Free to discover who she truly was, beyond the lies that had shaped her life. She picked up her phone and texted Sophie, "Coffee tomorrow?" There's something you need to know. In the end, it wasn't Nate who had brought them together. It wasn't even Thomas Reeves. It was the intricate pattern of lies and truths that made up the fabric of their lives, a perfect brew of deceit that had, against all odds, led to something genuine.
If you enjoyed, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications.